So what we're going to do is record the adding of an About Us page. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Tools, Firefox menu bar, and I'm going to open up Selenium Ide. This will open up a window here that contains information about the macro that we're running. Macros are called test cases. The reason is that these macros can be used in order to test a website in order to make sure that nothing is broken. We're using it for an alternate purpose, which is recording macros to modify configuration rather than to test it. When we open Selenium Ide, it's set automatically to begin recording. So I'm going to click this to stop recording, and we'll start it again when we're ready to record our process. So to begin with, let's go ahead and navigate to the page where we want to add the About Us page. Now in Drupal 7, a module called Overlay is installed automatically, and so when we click on any of these administration links, it opens up an overlay on the page. Now Selenium doesn't really work very well with this. It interprets the actions that you take a little bit differently and makes it so you can't play the entire macro all the way through without stopping. You would need to trigger every individual step manually. So if we want to get a full macro, what we'll need to do is get out of the overlay. And we can do that by right-clicking on any of these items and opening them up in a new tab. So what this did was it took us to admin/content. From here, let's go ahead and begin recording. So I'm going to hit the record button, and I'm going to jump back here and click add content. We'll go ahead and add our About Us page as a basic page. For the title, we'll do About Us. And then for the body, we'll put in some text. Okay, and let's go ahead and submit this by clicking Save. All right, so we created our About Us page. Now if we look at our test, we'll see the steps involved. At this point, we want to stop recording. If we didn't, then every step that we made within the website would be recorded, and we'd need to clean up our test afterwards. Now this is one of my most common mistakes when I use Selenium. Okay, so here's the list of our steps. This initial step was added automatically to take us to the place where this test began. This wasn't actually triggered by an action. So it'll first take us to admin/content, and then the first thing we did was click on a link to add content. Now this target column here includes a selector to the element that we clicked. Now because there were a couple of links on the page that said add content, you notice up here there's a link that said add content, that it had to use a more specific selector, so that's why it looks a little bit complex. We can see the whole thing by clicking on the item, and we can see that the CSS is ul.actionlinks, and then within that the li, within that the a. So for that click, it performed a click and wait, which is clicking something and then waiting for the page to reload. Once it reloaded, we then clicked another link that said basic page. Notice that this is a much simpler selector because there's no other links on that page that say basic page, and it waited for the page to refresh. And when it did, we had our form. So we began filling out our form. Our first item was filling out the title. So that was an input that had ID edit title. We put in About Us. And then we moved to the body, which had ID edit body and so on. And then we clicked the submit button that had the ID edit submit. And that was the end of our macro. Now if we play this back again, we'll get another page. Let's go ahead and do that. Now notice there's two play buttons here. This play button on the left will play all of the test cases that are listed here in a row. Right now we just have one test case, so we can press this or this, and this one will play just the test case that we have selected. So as we do it, notice things are changing over here. And when it's done, we have another About Us page. Notice the URL says About Us-0, which is Drupal's way of creating a unique URL for every piece of content. So let's say at some point we decide we want to change a couple of the parameters of this particular piece of content. We want to change the title, and we want to add a menu link for it. The first part, changing the title, is very easy. I'm going to jump back to Selenium, and you see here that for each input that we fill out, we have the value. So if we clicked on this item here, we'd see the command, the target, and the value listed here, and we can edit these. So if we want to change this to About the Team, we just change it here, and when we play this back, it will add that for the input instead. Adding the page as a menu item is a little bit trickier, but not too much so. One way that we could do it, of course, would be re-recording the entire test. But what we can also do is record particular actions in our browser and splice them into our test. So what I'm going to do is go to the edit page for the About Us node, and I'm going to scroll down. So now we want to click this checkbox. So I'm going to go back to Selenium, and I'm going to click record to begin recording this, and I'm going to click this checkbox. And then I'm going to go back to Selenium. And you see that our click was added here. Now I'm going to stop recording, and this probably isn't exactly where we want this click. So I'm going to highlight it, and then I'm going to drag it down to where I want it, which is right before submitting the form. So now if we play this back again, we'll watch the changes over here in the browser. We have our new piece of content. The title is About the Team, and we now have a tab here in the menu because we selected that checkbox. Now there's a lot of great built-in help with this Selenium tool. We can see a log of what's happened down here, and we can click on any of these items in order to see a reference for how to use them. So for this click and wait, for example, it automatically loads this reference that tells you what parameters to pass to it. It says there's one parameter called locator, and that's what this is right here. And it explains what it does. Clicks on a link button, checkbox, or radio button, and then if it causes a new page to load, it waits for the page to load. You can also insert new commands. So say if I wanted to insert one right before the submit button, I can do so here, and then I can add whatever command I want. And as I spell, notice that it pre-fills a select box below with matches to what I've been spelling. I'm going to go ahead and add a pause, which will simply stop the execution of the macro for a certain amount of time. You can learn more about it down here, and what it says is that it has one parameter, the wait time, which is the amount of time to sleep in milliseconds. So we're going to put that right here, and we'll do 3000. Now if we play this back again, once it gets to this pause, it will just simply wait for a little bit. Okay, now it's waiting, and now it's submitting.